Boom.
Boom.
Oh, but now you don't have the little, like, Felix's face in the corner when we start.
All right. Welcome to Talking in the Chasm. Compassionate, controversial conversation between best friends. Holy man.
And an atheist.
An atheist today. Not the atheist.
I'm
back to...
Just Anne.
Back to just one of the regiments.
And I'm Matthew.
I'm Felix.
Today, we're going to get hate mail.
Really? Oh,
Yeah.
You think?
I'm pretty sure.
We didn't get abortion hate mail.
Yeah, most people were very good.
The dude that was really angry, that was like on materialism or something, right?
Was it really? It wasn't even on the abortion video.
Wow, that's crazy. Okay.
Okay, well, good.
So today, what are we talking about?
Today we're going to talk about vaccines.
Vaccines. All right. So I
Go with the controversial
vaccinate my children, and you
do not. I have now. There is a little caveat. Hannah started her vaccines. My oldest.
So do you call yourself an anti-vaxer like these people?
Oh, that's a really ugly word. I don't, and it has so many connotations. I would rather say that I have some feelings about vaccines.
I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I just don't vaccinate my children. Is that something?
It's like calling pro-choice people anti-life.
Yeah, right. I'm anti-life. I got no problem with that. Okay.
I think the position's a little more nuanced.
We need to start with the reasons I vaccinate my children are because of scientific evidence and the fact that we've eradicated many diseases that I don't want my children to get.
Sure.
And also, we'll talk about this a little bit later, but the herd immunity, I'm a big believer in. I believe in germ theory, and so that's my position. So, but why don't you tell me why you don't?
Well, let me tell you where I'm at,
okay.
And then maybe if we have time, I'll tell you how I got there. Where I'm at now. So my youngest is almost 1, and my oldest is 19, and over the years we haven't. I've revisited the issue probably in those 20 years, probably 5 or 6 times. I've taken another deep dive and said, hey, I don't want to be obstinate. I don't want to be an idiot. I want to make informed decisions. So let's take another look and see where am I subject to prejudice or bias, or what's research doing, or where are things at.
And then you decided to keep being an idiot?
And then I decided to keep being an idiot. But I'm at the place now where I've been talking with my wife, and Hannah and David are married now, so our first child's married, and they're going to have to figure out what they're going to do for their children. And right. I've had conversations with all my older children especially, and said, hey, look, I made the best decision that I knew to make for you and your children. This isn't one of those things that I have any expectations that you follow my lead on. You need to look into this. It's your children. It's your family's health. You need to weigh the pros and cons and look at it for yourself. The way that we got there, though, I certainly didn't start in that category. I was just, when we had our first baby, I was like, go to the pediatrician, tell me what to do. Erica was 19 years old. I was 21. What do we know? There's doctors for this kind of stuff. I had all my vaccines as a kid, so it's not like I was from some conspiratorial community that was predisposed, like my poor children. But when Hannah had her second MMR vaccine, Hannah was a brilliant child. I can't remember all the milestones now, but I bought her first Bible at 2 because she knew her alphabet and could say all the sounds and was starting to put together words. She's a brilliant child. So when we came home, she was fully ambulatory, speaking in full sentences, perfectly clear communicating child.
I haven't bought my my
You haven't
child
bought
their
the Bible.
first Bible yet.
Well, I'll buy you one.
They're 20.
I got extras on the shelf. When we went to the pediatrician's office, we had a great pediatrician in Oregon, and she gave her shots, and I think it was just her second course of MMR. And by the time we got home, she wouldn't wake up in her car seat. She started getting a rash on her face, and I brought her inside, and she started walking around like she was drunk. And I was like, babe, what is wrong with our child?
Yeah.
And so we called the pediatrician's office right away. We didn't even know this was possible. We didn't know what's going on. And the pediatrician said, it's probably a minor reaction to the vaccine. Just keep an eye on her, and if it doesn't resolve itself within a couple hours, I don't remember exactly what she said, then go into the ER and have her checked out. Give her some Benadryl, see what happens. So we're like, oh, what in the world? What did we do? And so we went into the ER, and they treated us like teen mom, because Erica's 19 and I'm 20, and they're like, we said, hey, we were in the pediatrician's office today, we just had a vaccine, and she started acting crazy when we came home. He's like, that's impossible. We're like, what do you mean it's impossible?
Yeah.
I was like, it's not impossible, it's exactly what happened. No, that this cannot be from the vaccine. I was like, dude, her pediatrician, call him. That's what she told us. And that's when I first was like, what's going on here?
That's a bad doctor.
It is a bad doctor.
That's not a scientist.
So when that happened, I was like, why are they like this? Why is he trying to treat me like I'm an idiot and can't see up from down, and trying to tell me something can't happen that does? So that's when I started looking at, why is she having a reaction? What's going on? I will say this in regards to my own biases. I was much more conspiratorial as a young man than I am today. And so I was seeing a devil behind every bush. Not literally. I wasn't into spiritism that way. But I certainly was no friend of the United States government or conventional medicine and pharma business and any of those things. So I was an easy sell for the anti-vax propaganda. And there's a lot of anti-vax propaganda.
Right, no, for sure.
So when I kind of bought that stuff hook, line, and sinker, but over the years reassessed and said, what's going on? What do I really think about this? And I'll tell you where I'm at now. Where I'm at now is that I have four main hesitations about vaccines, and I'm really legitimately open. I'm open to discovery. I'm open to reassessing, still to this day. But my four reservations that haven't been answered thus far is, one, the moral issues, which we can talk about at length. There are a host of vaccines that come from aborted fetal cell lines. Mm-hmm. And I have a moral objection to those. I don't care how well they work. I don't care if they are panacea for all known disease. I'm not going to use them because of a moral condition. Okay. Secondly, I wonder about efficacy and the claims that are made around efficacy. Not that there aren't, obviously polio is gone, but I wonder when you read articles about a measles outbreak at Disneyland or at some college, it's always blamed on the anti-vax community, and then when you get to the last paragraph, everyone was vaccinated that broke out with the disease, or 90% or whatever the case may be. So we hear these propaganda on the other side.
I mean, I'm not sure about. I have not read an article that's like that said, there was a huge outbreak. I mean, I have read articles where they're like, wow, they had to close this school because of and the article did say there were multiple anti-vaxxers, and that was it. Didn't end up with, and by the way, everybody.
The last one, the last one a couple years ago in Cape Cod. The big
I was thinking
measles
there was
outbreak.
last year in West Virginia or something.
I don't know about the West Virginia one.
Anyway.
The last one I read was Cape Cod, and it was this whole propaganda piece on anti-vaxxers. But then when you get to the end, the last page of the story, it wasn't a case here in Cape Cod because all these high school students were actually vaccinated. Well, what are you making this a propaganda piece for then? So that's a common tactic, and it makes people not trust. And the fact that people who are vaccinated get these things, and the change in schedules, the change in needing for boosters, like many of the vaccines I got when I was a kid, they told us once and done. Now it turns out you need boosters. Well, who knows?
Right.
Like, so there's efficacy questions about what actually is, how well do we know this? Why did we think 20 years ago, 30 years ago that once and done, and now we need boosters? All those are open questions in my mind. So that's 2, efficacy. 3 is necessity. I think there's legitimate questions to ask about why we're vaccinating for chickenpox, for instance. And I've looked at some of the numbers about shingles, about adverse reactions to Varicella, however you pronounce that virus. But all of us had chickenpox as kids, and all of us were fine. And then lastly, how much pharma medicine conspiracy stuff is involved. How much of this is about money? How much of the pushing a vaccine is really public health, and how much is a multi-billion-dollar industry? And those are questions that I still have left open.
Okay. Can I sort of attack them one
Please.
by one? Sort of. So, what was the first one?
Moral.
So this is the good one. I mean, this is so. When we spoke about this before, you had mentioned, abortion is the, abortive fetal tissue is the reason that we don't get certain types of vaccines. And you said that you understand that there's not aborted fetal tissue in them now. It's just that that's when they were used.
Although there probably is genetic material from
right,
those
but not
fetuses,
from a direct fetus.
Yeah.
But
But it's not like they're injecting fetal cells.
So that would, to me, that would be a moral problem that you have. Like, I don't believe in abortion, therefore I'm not going to use the fruits of abortion to help something else. And in thinking about this and researching, I read this sort of idea. Okay, let's say that patient A needs a heart. Patient B dies and has a heart that's workable. You can take the heart out of patient B, give it to patient A, and he's fine. Everything's good, right? However, let's say that a doctor murders patient B and takes his heart. Does he give it to patient A? Patient A still needs a heart and would live with that heart. But there's a problem now because I don't believe in murder. And I don't want to, further the idea that murder is okay,
Yeah.
So do you throw the heart away and now 2 people are dead, or do you use it? And that's maybe a tough one because the doctor killed the patient. But what about this? Let's say somebody's murdered, rushed to the ER,
Sure.
and then their heart is okay and is used and can be used for patient A. I don't believe in murder, but I'm not gonna not take a heart from a murder victim because So when I think of it in that way, abortions are not administered to harvest fetal tissue. Abortions happen because of the reasons that we talked about, and then that tissue will be either thrown away or done to save lives. I mean, done to do some good in the world. So, to me, the moral objection doesn't seem valid only because it's not going to stop abortions. Abortion is a completely separate issue. And whether or not you use vaccines made from tissue, I mean, the fact is that there's certain diseases that only happen in humans. And you can't say, oh, can I inject you with polio and just so we can do. So they find abortive tissue is like, well, hey, here's human tissue that won't react to pain, that nobody will so it makes sense to use it because it's refuse basically at this point. Whether or not you believe in abortion or not, at that point it is refuse. I mean, it is garbage. It's not going to become a life, right? So even if it's gathered unethically, me personally, I'm going to save the patient. I'm going to use that heart, even if I don't believe in murder, because it's there. So while I have no problem with abortion, I would certainly not have a problem with using a medicine that was derived from the from the refuse of an abortion procedure, right? And with that line of thinking, would you then, look at the Bayer aspirin and look up every single ingredient and find out all along the way whether it was, whether they experimented on monkeys or whether, it's like so much medicine is from years and years of study and research with so many things. And I'm sure that there's lots of, I don't want to torture monkeys, but I benefit greatly from the fact that people did.
Mm-hmm.
And while I don't endorse animal cruelty, I also, in the case of Sarah's father, he had a heart attack and was given heart surgery and lived another 40 years. And that surgery was as a result of directly doing the surgery on monkeys.
Mm-hmm.
So in that way, yes, I'm very glad that Sarah's father got to live another 40 years, even though I don't want to hurt monkeys.
I think that the problem with that line of reasoning is that, so if we were, I was thinking about this today too, and I was thinking about us getting together and talking, and there are other systems of oppression that I passively engage in. I mean, America is one.
Right.
Our petrodollars
and we talked
are
about
another.
Buying a shirt and a sweater,
Yeah.
and that's going to be
So there are. I understand. I'm not trying to be a monastic recluse and keep myself completely like in a vacuum, like a moral bubble boy. I do recognize that there are systems of oppression in the past that I interact with, and even some in the present. I think that where I would draw my lines around ethics and morality is in when there's an ongoing ethical travesty, when there's a moral evil happening and it's currently happening and perpetuating and profiting. You know, the recent Daladin exposés on Planned Parenthood and the purchasing of fetal parts for medical research and other things have made it clear that there is a lot of profit to be made through fetal tissues.
Well, yes. What I would say, if I were you, I mean, if there were a Planned Parenthood place that was talking people into abortions in order to sell, I mean, then that's evil in the extreme. That is awful. That okay, I totally get it.
Well, I don't know that they're not, but
well, I don't think that's what's happening, and I certainly wouldn't assume that that's what's happening and not vaccinating my children because of that.
But let's draw what I think would be a closer analogy. If you needed a heart, and you could buy one on the black market, like let's say there's a Chinese body harvesting farm where they're going around picking up homeless people and drug addicts and putting them in buckets of ice and taking their organs out and selling them on the black market. Well, they're going to kill those people whether you buy it or not. Do you engage in that moral evil?
Well, see,
because they're dead already?
I think that's the difference between the doctor killing patient A or or patient A being murdered by somebody else.
Well,
I mean, yeah, you could say in the same way that, like, why not buy a fur coat? The animal's already dead. Well, you're creating a space in the market for another fur coat.
Well, I think abortion's doing that too with fetal tissue for research and medicine.
I just don't. I just feel like
if this was 2320 and nobody done an abortion for 300 years and we had vaccines from what happened in the 60s, I'd be like, come on, you're being a little whatever. It's long gone. I mean, but it's not. It's happening all over the country today.
If you could, you can show me a direct link between somebody murdering somebody in Asia for a heart to sell it on the black market, that because that happens. So that's a direct, I buy this heart, but it's blood money. I mean, this is somebody died for this so that this person could profit. That's just horrible. I don't see abortion in that same way. You can dislike the fact that people are getting the people are having abortions, but they're having abortions and not because of medical research. They're having abortions because of their reasons that they want to have abortions. Now,
but how much is that money? Those millions of dollars funding the clinics to make that available.
You mean science drug companies are funding the abortion clinics?
Well, they're buying these fetal materials to the tune of millions of dollars.
I don't know that.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's a for sale thing.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's garbage, as far as I'm concerned. As far as I know.
Yeah, it's bio waste, but they're selling it to all kinds of medical research facilities. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I would say that's a moral problem. I wouldn't sell it.
But in any case, but that doesn't actually have any direct correlation to the vaccines from fetal lines from the 60s. I mean, it has something to do with now and it has something to do with the future. Right. But what my point in that is that there's still a system that I believe is oppressive and violent. That's ongoing.
I just don't
think
think
that's connected to how these vaccines were developed.
I just don't think that there's a direct connection. I don't. It's not a train car pulling it. There is a connection in that it is abortive tissue.
Uh-huh.
But if you were to somehow show me that people were being talked into or given abortions against their will or something so that they could have that fetal material harvested, then I would say that's absolutely evil.
I don't think that's the case. I mean, I don't know if it is, but I don't have any reason to believe that's the case. And there are many people who are conscientious Christians who would make the claim that you're making, that we don't have to feel moral responsibility. I do because I think it's such a travesty that's happening. And when you read the case studies, like you can look up those cell lines and the original clinical reports on the doctors who harvested that fetal tissue, and they specifically chose these abortions because they were perfectly healthy elective abortions. And I'm a little bit critical. I'm going to step way out of my area of expertise. I think that the reason that they continue to use these cell lines is because it's a cost-benefit thing. It's just a little more expensive to use older tissue instead of fetal tissue. They can use all kinds of human tissue for this. They're using fetal tissue because you have what's that limit, the Halec limit, where a cell can reproduce 50 times before the cell line dies. And that's been done way fewer times when you start with a fetus than if you work with an adult. The cells have more longevity, so you can get a longer run out of a cell line if you start with a fetal tissue.
Well, I just feel like your energy would be better spent in protesting abortion rather than,
that's a part of my protest of abortion.
Well, yeah. To me, it's just not. It's just too. Well, to me, the risk that you put the rest of society in is greater than the good that would come from that, especially when you consider that it's not really a connected.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, of course it's connected because it's abortive tissue, and abortive tissue comes from abortions, but it's not directly connected. And I've said it. So that's my sort of thing about morality. And let me just say too that this is an issue that I feel strongly about, only because I live my life such that you can do whatever you want as long as it doesn't hurt me, and I'm going to do whatever I want as long as it doesn't hurt you. That's how I feel, as long as you're not infringing upon the rights of others. And if you have a child that has a compromised immune system, which you do.
Yeah.
Then my vaccinating my own children protects your child.
Mm-hmm.
If I have a child with a compromised immune system and you do not vaccinate your children, you are putting my child in danger. You could very well, my child could die because it could get a disease carried by one of your children that they're not even sick, and because I have a compromise. So the herd immunity idea is that if we vaccinate as many people as we possibly can, then those who are the most at risk will not be exposed to the disease because they will be surrounded by people who are vaccinated.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like, if I don't want to wear my seatbelt, that's on me. But if I reach over and take off your seatbelt, that's not okay.
Yeah.
And when your decisions affect my children, that's where that's where I'm just like, I don't know. I mean, and we won't even talk about the people saying it causes autism and this ridiculousness, but simply because there's absolutely not a single shred of scientific evidence in any way that supports that. But the herd immunity thing, I just wonder
how I process that.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the things over the last few years that I've given the most consideration to, because my kind of premises around vaccines, it hasn't changed much. I'm a lot softer than I used to be, but the basic premise has been the same since I was young. But the thing that I have considered extensively is this question of what is my obligation, because I care very much about my fellow man. I care very much about my neighbor. and what is my obligation to my neighbor. And I think that here you have, it's a more complex analysis than this, because there's other factors aside from the herd immunity issue that are at play. Like one issue that pertains, I think, to bioethics is informed consent. And here's where it always gets down to, when I have a very pushy, aggressive doctor,
right,
I always come down to the place I say, are you telling me you're 100% going to guarantee, and you'll put your name and your money and your reputation on the line, that my child will not have an adverse reaction? And he'll say, no, I can't do that. So this has to be something that people have to weigh for themselves. I have to weigh the good of my child versus the good of the community.
Right.
And that, I understand the probabilities around that they're very high.
I mean, you could very well say, was it Hannah? You could say, well, my child Hannah had a very serious reaction that scared the hell out of us, and for that reason, we've decided not to vaccinate our other children. I mean, I don't want to see that happen. I mean, that's perfectly legitimate. Then you would say your child is in that group of people that need to be protected by everybody else.
I don't know if that's the case. I mean, that's not my claim. My claim is that...
But it could be your fear.
Sure.
I'm just saying that would be a completely reasonable reason for not vaccinating.
It's certainly how I started on this path. So it's the beginning chain to where I'm at. But I think even if that wasn't the case, I think that I value autonomy and informed consent higher than corporate good. And I don't mean corporate good. I mean the potential to damage herd immunity is a lower priority in my schema than the government or the community being able to force medical decisions on people. If people can't sit down with their own health and say, I'm going to weigh my own risks before I consider everyone else, I think that's a valid premise. You have to be able to say, I'm going to consider what I think is best for me and my children, and then look at the rest of the community around me and weigh those two things and discern which one I think is more important in this risk scenario. Here's another thing I always come back to is, like, there are children that can't eat peanuts. Like, we don't know all these, autoimmune diseases, everything that's getting triggered in people. We don't know where this stuff is coming from. And that, when I was coming back around, I wasn't involved in the medical community much for most of my middle children's lives, because we didn't go to doctors, we didn't have health problems. But with Cephas, I've spent, Erica had 300 appointments first year. And it's not like we're among slouch doctors. These are all Harvard people, and they don't take kindly to the idea that you don't vaccinate. So I've had real open conversations with pediatricians about Cephas's care, and I say, okay, because I don't know, none of us know what's wrong with him. How do we assess the risks? Let's do real comparisons, and they're surprisingly hard to find. That's one of the other things.
Well, I mean, Cephas has a disease that 50 people in the entire world have.
Yeah.
And if you have a fear, then that's, like I said, that is a completely legitimate, that makes perfect sense. I mean, to me, I feel like the risk that you are not vaccinating your children based on your opposition to abortion, to me, that's unreasonable. Just because the connection isn't direct, and because the potential harm could be life or death. I mean, it could be could be something serious. But to say that, my family, for all I know, my family are all hypersensitive to it is very reasonable, because there is evidence that is true. And certainly Cephas can't have a right? He's
well, we don't know. We know much more about where he's at now.
But I wouldn't risk it. I mean, did a doctor tell you go ahead and risk it?
He put together. So here was the interesting analysis. Is he said, okay, like when we had that conversation with Cephas's doctor, and I said, look, what are the chances that this child, not herd immunity, not society, this child is going to be exposed to polio? 0. I mean, nil. He's not going to be exposed to polio. Okay, so that for him, now I understand why he's not exposed to polio because of the herd immunity, but for him, there's a zero risk of polio. So we can take that off the list. So we did this process. Let's go through and so when we did that process, I eliminated the ones that I had a moral compunction against, and we eliminated the ones that were very low or negligible risks. There was a few, I think 5 or 6 vaccines that he still recommended. And I said, okay, now my theory is we don't know what's wrong with him, and putting chemicals into him is a crapshoot. And his theory was he's medically compromised. He needs to be protected from these more than other people. And I said, okay, well, I respect your opinion and counsel as a doctor, but this is a decision I have to make.
Right, and what I would do in your shoes is I would not immunize him, and I would immunize the rest of my kids. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But this isn't a debate about, somebody who has a compromised child. Sure. Of course, that's what herd immunity is for. It's for Cephas and Hannah, And if you have even a suspicion that your other children would be harmed, I don't have any. Not the hysterical online. Oh my God, we're gonna get autism.
But I don't have any clue, and nobody does. Nobody does until there's a reaction, and they're so rare. That's true with
everything you ingest in your body, food, everything. I mean, everything.
But that's
that you
why
process.
I think people you have to leave this kind of decision in people's hands to make for themselves.
I agree.
Because you just don't know.
I agree. And if my problem with anti-vaxxers is the decision isn't because I'm afraid for a very specific reason that my child will have a reaction that will be traumatic or deadly. It's because I heard that the President Trump said that the person didn't have autism and then they got immunized and now they're autistic. I mean, he said that to the country, to the world. And so people go, oh, well, you know what? I just won't give them the shot. They don't like shots anyway. I won't give it to them. And then they definitely won't be autistic. And it's thinking like that hurts the society. Yeah. Because when we do all stop taking polio, then it comes back. Yeah. And, I saw the Last Man in an Iron Lung on YouTube. Do you know this? It was like made in the 50s, and he has these people that make it for him. And he's lying there, and somebody asked him about it. He's like, oh my gosh, I mean, this is the worst. It's the worst. Anything you can do. I mean, if it's a problem that's been solved, I can't believe people would allow this door to be cracked open again.
So let me tell you an interesting conversation. I think it's another reason that here's my advice to the medical community. If you want to win people that are against vaccines, first of all, take our honest questions honestly. Like when you get somebody like me that shows up in a doctor's office where he says there's no adverse reactions, you're a tinfoil hat wearing kook, it's wrong of you to even think about these questions with your children.
Just really quickly, that's a problem with the medical community in general. This sort of superior attitude is outrageous. And I mean, then you have the wrong doctor. I mean, to me...
But there's a lot of them.
Right. To me, honestly, it's 50% medical knowledge and 50% bedside manner. If you don't know how to talk to people, you have no business being a doctor. Yeah. And if you make people feel insecure about what you intend to do or recommend,
people like me will hide. We'll hide with our children.
And
we'll stay out of doctors' offices, and if we feel if you take people that have the kind of overactive concern that anti-vax community has, and you make them feel threatened, they will hide in holes.
And that is a separate issue that I absolutely agree with. This bedside manner thing needs to be addressed and taught better in medical
school. So let me talk to you about an experience I had. So when we were planning at one point to move to Uganda for a few years to do our refugee work with the South Sudanese. And so one of the entry requirements to get into Uganda is a yellow fever vaccine. Now this is a funny thing. There's some suspicion that part of the reason that the yellow fever vaccine is required to enter Uganda is mostly to mess with Kenyans. It's an immigration issue more than as much as a public health issue, because people can't afford to get the vaccine, they won't come into the country. Yellow fever isn't communicable between people. It's only mosquito blood-borne transmission. And so if you get yellow fever in Uganda, it's not like you can create an outbreak. Mosquitoes can create an outbreak, people can't. And there's been like 6 cases in the country in the last 10 or 15 years.
Right, but obviously if everyone was vaccinated, then it wouldn't happen, because the mosquito would take the blood of a vaccinated person and it wouldn't be contagious.
I'm just saying it's not for the people and it's not for the country. A person unvaccinated entering the country can't cause an outbreak.
Oh yeah, right, I understand.
So all that's kind of the background. And the yellow fever vaccine is one of the few live virus vaccines still. And the last death from yellow fever of an American was from the vaccine. It causes encephalitis. So anyhow, we were all planning to move to Uganda. I had been several times, and I just I didn't get the vaccine, and I just kind of bluffed my way through the border. I just said no.
They actually won't let you into the country if you're not
vaccinated. They're not supposed to. I got through several times. I just said no, I'm not going to do that. I don't need it. I'm coming from America. I don't have yellow fever. I'm not going to get it. Right. And I just walked by and acted like a dumb American, and I got my papers stamped. So I did that a few times, but I knew I couldn't. I can do that. I can take the
you're
risk.
You're a big, intimidating guy. They're not going to
kind of bluff my way through, but I can't do that with children and my wife and everything. So we got to buckle down. We got to get this vaccine. So we go in. They closed the whole travel clinic because this is the health system that knows us. They know we don't vaccinate, and they know there's 12 of us coming. And so they literally shut down the travel clinic for the morning. It was just us in the clinic.
Wow.
And Does
that make you feel special or evil?
Well, I didn't know how to take it. I wasn't sure.
Who's protecting you here?
It turned out the guy was super cool. He was a really nice guy. I very much appreciate him. And there was a young, very tall Indian guy from Oxford, and he was like a world expert on typhoid, and he was working with this virologist at the hospital, and so we had this long conversation. I had this whole discussion, top virologist at BCH, and I shared with him my concerns, and he did everything right. He's like, you're not crazy. I'm not assuming you're a tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. These are valid questions, and there's valid answers to them. Let me help you work through it. So we have this whole conversation, and I say, okay, I appreciate that. I want to think about that, all this stuff. I said, okay, now let's talk about this specific case. Now, I'm taking my family to Uganda, where there's been 6 cases of yellow fever in the last 10 years, and there's been 1 death from the yellow fever vaccine in the U.S., which that's a small percentage of Americans that get this vaccine, in the last 3 years. I think it was 2015 when that person died. I said, if you were to weigh, just shooting from the hip, my risk from the vaccine versus my risk from yellow fever, which is greater? He said, in this case, it's probably the vaccine.
Yeah, especially for your family who's been proven to be susceptible.
So there's policies in place that are blanket public health policies, like this case in Uganda, that don't allow people to be individual and make individual decisions. And I feel like here's what the public health debate is about. I feel like, and the reason I'm so hesitant to trust the public health decisions is that they're telling us what they think we should hear so that we'll get vaccinated, not let's put all of our cards on the table. We'll tell you exactly how many adverse reactions there were from the vaccine. We'll tell you exactly how many adverse reactions there was from the virus, and you can compare apples to apples in your demographic and make a real informed decision. And that would go light years.
Of course.
And I don't understand why it's not there. And it only creates distrust in me that it's not.
Well, it's because people don't know how to communicate.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yeah, and maybe it's there. Maybe I just haven't found it, but I've been looking for years.
It is there because you had a fantastic guy in Uganda. It's there. It's just maybe it's rare, unfortunately. But
what needs to happen is some top vaccine immunologist needs to collaborate with me to write literature for the anti-vax community.
Yeah. Well. Yeah.
This typhoid kid. Let me finish telling you because this is the rest of the story. This Indian guy, the typhoid expert, he says I'm so fat. Like we were like a museum curiosity to him. He's like, in my country, people travel across rivers and jungles to get vaccines, and I come to America, and people are like, I don't want it. And he said, it just blows my mind. And he told me, he said the cultural differences are amazing too. He said if we give a child a vaccine in the U.S. and they get a red bump on their arm, the parents freak out. And they think somebody's dying or they're going to have autism or something. He said, if I give somebody a vaccine in India and they don't cry and they don't feel like it hurts for a day, they think it didn't work. And they're mad and they come back for another one.
Yeah.
He said it's just entirely different cultures. And he was telling me that somewhere where he was working in England, they actually have a clinic. They don't do procedures. It's just a clinic for people to ask questions about vaccines. There's a library of vaccine material and information. There's a doctor in a non-threatening environment where you can come and ask whatever questions. They don't treat you like an idiot. They don't treat you like a pariah. They just answer questions.
Yeah. I mean, that's would solve many of the world's problems. I mean, what we need is education and understanding, of course.
Yeah.
So, as usual, this just turned out to be very different because you have an outrageous view that seems incredible, and then upon talking to you, I realize, oh, okay, it's a reasoned, rational thing. We're not the hysteria to not vaccinate children is not the camp where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And you have very specific experience in cases. So, like I said, it's almost like talking to somebody who has a child who can't get an immunization for some reason. I mean, you wouldn't try to talk them into it if it's going to be life-threatening or traumatic. So that's a different thing. My big problem is with the hysteria, which is because people are not educated in this way, because they haven't had a nice doctor sit down and say, here's, you got questions, hit me, I'm going to answer them all for you. People don't really understand what germ theory is and how it even works. So, but I had just actually one question for you.
Sure.
One final sort of thing. We talked about, in the abortion thing, I asked you if you would abort a baby to save a mother. And I believe that the answer was yes, in certain situations.
I think that's a choice they should make, yeah.
But yes, let's say she's unconscious and it's your wife. I think what we came up with is that there are situations in which an abortion is something that you would do because it would be for the best.
Pregnancy,
right?
Or there's no viability or whatever.
Yeah. The crazy stuff happening. What was it, Georgia? Where they said an ectopic pregnancy
has to be reimplanted.
And doctors are like, that has never worked. It is not. There is not one case where that has ever worked. It does not work. It's not it's not a thing. Anyway, off topic. But so if you would abort a baby to save the mother, why would you not use a vaccine derived from fetal tissues to save children's lives?
Well, I mean, I think that would change the scope of this conversation, but that doesn't happen to be the case. What happens to be the case is that they were elective abortions of healthy children. And I think that's why they don't harvest those fetal materials as readily for these kinds of projects, is because there's some question about the health of the child.
Yeah, and I think we covered it better before.
Yeah.
With the thing. So I would consider your family to be sort of at risk.
I don't know. I don't know how much we qualify. I mean, there have been minor reactions.
There's no qualify. It's I saw my child have a very traumatic reaction. I don't want to see that again. As much as I, want to help the herd. Mm-hmm. This is a situation where maybe we're the ones that need protecting. And and maybe that isn't the case. Maybe your other children are, would be okay with it. I don't know. But to me, that's the sort of thinking that you have to do, because you have Cephas who really is vulnerable to, to more than he's got. God, he doesn't need more.
Yeah, he doesn't. I don't know. What I try to play through my mind is, if that wasn't the case, where would I be? And I think that if
Hannah hadn't had a reaction.
I mean, if I happen to cross this another way, if I didn't have that reaction.
Well, let's say Hannah did not have a reaction, and you went to a doctor who said, "You're not crazy. What's up? Tell me."
Yeah.
Then, here's how it works. Mm-hmm. I mean, when my sister got sick, she had a seizure disorder, and I went to the hospital every day. I was there all the time, and one of the doctors pulled me into a side room and pulled out a chalkboard and showed me her graph and pulled it out and said, "This is what this means, this is what this means," and it was just so. It just made me feel so good.
Yeah.
Not only to know that she was in good hands, but that they care about how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And that they showed me everything about how it works. I mean, a doctor should sit down with if you were afraid of vaccines for any reason, they should sit down and say, "Let me quell your fears." Yeah. Or you tell me what the fears, and I'll tell you whether they're justified or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because there are justifiable reasons to not vaccinate a child.
Yeah.
But autism is not one.
Yeah.
So if you think that you are going to get your child will get autism because of a vaccination, then you need to be taught that is not that. You need to be shown the empirical evidence. You need to be shown here's why that won't happen. And
I think presenting that data in a usable way, here's apples. Here's here's exactly how many people have an adverse reaction and to what varying degree with the chickenpox vaccine. And here's how many people have adverse reactions to chickenpox. Let's just look at them per capita. Sure. Out of 1,000, here's how many have this, here's how many have that. That stuff would be huge. And it's wherever that data is hidden in research that's only accessible to biophysicists.
Right. I mean, I've this is related circuitously, but after 9/11, the FBI and everyone went on TV and they're like, "We're gonna get this guy. We're gonna go and there's gonna revenge." Yeah. What I feel like they should have done is they should have spent all of their money, all of their efforts into television commercials that say, here's why people wear the hijab. Mm-hmm. Here's what they believe. Here's where, here's the point of the religion. This is what extremism looks like. This is the percentage of people that are extremists. This is the percentage of people in this religion that have hurt people. This is the percentage of people in this religion that have helped people. Mm-hmm. I mean, if I understood, people were beating up Sikhs on the street because they had their hair was covered. They're not Muslims. It's so totally, so it's just education. It's just tell me what this is so that, we fear what is foreign to us. We fear what we don't understand, right? Mm-hmm. I don't understand the science of vaccines. I don't even know what we're talking about, really. I don't. I trust my doctor and so I do it. Yeah. But I don't understand the science of it. And if you have a problem with it, teach me the science of it. I'll teach you the science. This fear is just going to perpetuate until we are not afraid of people. Once we have a friend who's a Muslim, you're like, oh, okay, they're regular people. I get it. Oh, totally. Yeah. Now I understand. Oh, and he explains why the hair's covered. Your family explained to me why you guys dress the way you do, and now I understand. Yeah. So now I don't have to wonder what's up with that. There's no fear.
I think you're exactly right that in this issue and in a whole bunch of others, but I know it's true in this one, is that what it comes down to, because how many people have medical degrees in immunology? None of us are experts on this. So millions and millions of people are making decisions about this kind of personal healthcare decisions, and none of us are qualified to make the decision. Right. And what it comes down to is this, how we make sense of the world, this sense-making issue, and where we are willing to invest authority. Who am I going to listen to? And I think when people get on a certain track, there's a percentage of people that follow the not beaten path. If what we're all doing is vaccinating, there's going to be a crowd of people that are like, I don't want to go that way. I don't trust those authorities.
Right.
And that's based on personality. It's based on bad experiences. It's based on antisocial tendencies. It's based on a whole bunch of things.
It's part of the job. It's part of the job as a doctor is to say,
I agree.
I'm going to help you, and here's why you should trust me. Yeah. Here's why. I was a professional photographer for 15 years, and we did a great boudoir. One. We did all these crazy, we did things where people had to feel very comfortable, and so the whole first part of the process was to put people at ease, to make to say I'm a cool guy. It's going to be fun. It's going to be totally.
You don't have to be afraid. You can trust me.
Right. And a lot of people hate for having the picture taken, and a lot of it's because of the school photographer. It's like, okay, sit up, okay, smile, okay, here you go, next. There's no connection. So part of most people's job is, here's why you need to trust me.
Yeah.
Okay, and then then you decide whether you do or not. And if a doctor has made you feel unsafe or that you don't understand something or threatened or anything, then that's a bad doctor.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how good the medicine is; he's a bad doctor if you don't understand what's going on.
Well, here's where it gets dicey. It gets dicey when you're talking about children, and it gets dicey when you're talking about community health. Like, those two things complicate that discussion in ways that cause everyone's emotions to.
I mean, I don't have as big a fear of authority as you do.
I think that's true.
I don't have that.
Funny.
Well, I don't have. Well, actually, I do have some pretty awful experiences with authority. Now that I mention it, with cops and stuff, we'll talk about that later. But I don't know. I guess it's just my personality or my nature or something. I don't know. But
the atheist is less of a rebel than the Christian.
yeah. I don't have a huge problem with authority, and I'm quick to trust.
Mm-hmm.
But the bottom line is we do business with people that we like. You gotta like your doctor. You gotta like you gotta like your mechanic. You gotta like people that you do business with, and so their job is to get them to like you. That's the first part, and then the second part is the physical, whatever the job is. To me, so.
I really want to spend this next year. The other thing I feel like I feel less threatened. So let me examine my own biases. I think that there's a real specific bias about the fear of causing something bad is worse than the fear of something bad happening that you didn't cause. I think that's an integral part of how I've made decisions about my children. I didn't consciously do that, obviously.
Right,
Now that I'm older and can look back, I think that's a part of what plays into this scenario, is that if I make an active decision and there's a bad outcome, then I feel responsible. But if something passively, like the world is the world, and something bad happens, then you don't feel responsible. And I think that's built into some of this.
Well, I would say when I vaccinated my children, my daughter faints every time she gets a shot. I mean, she is like terrified of the doctor. She would bite and scratch, and she turns into a gecko and sticks to the walls, and everybody's trying to drag her down the hallway. It's an incredible ordeal. But
she's still that way?
Pretty much. But what's weird is that she'll get pierced, no problem. Like, she says, I want a nose piercing. No problem. And then we go to get a flu shot, and she's on the floor. I'm like, what? What's hers? Anyway. But as I'm giving this creature who's writhing around and screaming immunization, I'm thinking, I want what's best for her, and I'm doing this for her. But there is a part of me that's thinking I'm doing this for everybody else, too.
Sure.
I mean, I do believe in the herd immunity thing, because I've seen it. I understand. I've seen graphs. I've seen how it kind of works, and there is a part of me that puts her through torture, because I know that even if she doesn't get sick, she's gonna keep somebody who like Cephas from getting sick. So anyway,
that's good.
Let's stop there, maybe.
Yeah.
All right. I love you.
Love you too.